The opinions expressed during this podcast are the individual's own and do not represent those of Wyndham City Council.
Welcome everyone to Recently Returned, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the summer series. My name is Jonine and I'm a member of the Adult Program and Services team. Today we're visited by Emily, a member of the children's team. Lovely to see you today, Emily. To commence our chat, we have 3 quick questions to start us thinking about what we read, how we read, and the impact reading can have. So first off, Emily, what is your worst reading habit?
Thanks, Janine. I have a couple of bad reading habits, I think, but my worst one, I think, would have to be starting multiple books at the same time, so that I am constantly having to sort of remind myself which world I'm in and which characters I'm dealing with as I jump from book to book. So sometimes if I have too many good books in my to be read pile, I struggle with just limiting myself to one book at a time.
Lots of librarians have that problem, and I'm sure lots of our readers have the same problem.
Yeah.
So our second question is one of reflection, and it's about a book that you've read that you would like to experience again for the first time.
Yes, I love this question. It's also a hard one, but I would say when I read The Princess Bride for the first time, which I loved, I was on a train, on the train to Bendigo. It was a long train trip, and I had brought along The Princess Bride because I had it sitting on my shelf for a very long time and I hadn't read it yet. It was a nice little paperback, so it was good travel size. And I started to read it, and I was so blown away by how good it was that experience of starting that book on that train journey and loving it has just stuck with me for a long time. So yeah, I'd probably say The Princess Bride.
So you would recommend it?
I would recommend it, yeah.
For people travelling on trains?
Absolutely, yeah.
And our next question is looking at a book that you've read this year which challenged you for some reason.
So this would probably be a book that I read recently called The White Ship by Charles Spencer. This was a brilliant book. It's non-fiction, it's a historical book, and I would highly recommend it, but the reason why it challenged me was because it deals with a really fascinating period of English history in which we see this amazing figure of Matilda, who was almost the first Queen of England back in the 1100s. And I started reading this book in anticipation of reading more about her, but the fact that she wasn't even mentioned until over halfway through the book meant that I got really, really mad, and I almost threw the book across the room while I was reading it because I was so frustrated that she hadn't been mentioned earlier. But then I have to say the author did redeem himself and does talk about Matilda, but yes, up to that point I was kind of reading it with white knuckles. But it was still a brilliant read. It was very good.
Would you read another book by that author based on that experience?
Oh, I think I would. Yes, I would.
Thanks so much. Let's look now at a book that you would recommend for people to read this summer.
I recently read a brilliant YA fantasy novel by Maria V. Snyder, and the book is called Poison Study. And Poison Study was actually recommended to me by a colleague, and I had it sitting in my to-be-read pile for a very long time, finally got around to reading it, and it was a really, really brilliant book. I had a really intense reading experience with it in that it was a book that I stayed up until very late reading because I just couldn't put it down, which hasn't happened to me for a very long time. It was really well paced. I think if you like fast-paced books, you will enjoy Poison Study. So the main character is a young woman called Yelena, and she is imprisoned for murder. And we know pretty early on that she did commit this murder. And so a lot of questions arise from that. But she is given a choice to either be executed for murder or to become the poison taster for the commander who's in charge of the realm. And she chooses to become the poison taster, and that's where the story kicks off.
And our heroine starts her story early in the book this time?
Yes, she is there on page 1. Yeah, absolutely.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us today, and thank you everyone for joining us. Just to let you know, all the books recommended today are available for you to borrow from Wyndham Library Collection. Also a reminder to everyone to join the Summer Reads Just For You program, so we can send you 4 reading recommendations just for you. Check this out on our library website. And please let us know your thoughts on today's books and share your favourite reads on Recently Returned at wyndham.vic.gov.au or drop us a line on the library Facebook page. Also, let us know any great titles you've read and would like to recommend to all our listeners and readers at Wyndham. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a special thank you, Emily.